All right, good morning and welcome to our first summer edition Downtown Management Forum. Today we have Larisa Ortiz from Streetsense. They worked on a commercial recovery guide in partnership with LISC, and she's going to provide an overview of that guide to kick off a conversation about recovery. For those who do not know us, Downtown New Jersey is a member-supported nonprofit education and advocacy organization all about downtown revitalization. We provide technical assistance and other education activities. We review policy and comment, etc. And we also like to recognize our members in our newsletter and annual awards, etc. We've been doing these forums since the shutdown started. All of the forums, there's video, PowerPoint summaries all up online. So do check them out. And actually in the chat box, I already have a page for today's forum, and you can see the PowerPoint now, and then we'll upload the video and the summary later. We don't have another forum planned just yet. We're definitely not doing one next week because it's a holiday, at least the holiday's on Saturday, and I believe everybody has off on Friday. And we're gonna, for the summer, probably back out to, one every 2 or 3 weeks as opposed to every week. Just a couple of slides. I shared these last week, but I thought they, again, were good kind of jumping off points to talk about recovery. And this one is consumer confidence. And you can see, so the top blue boxes are people who are already doing these type of activities and or are doing them right after the restrictions are lifted. And for the most part, the restrictions, with the exception of the mall, are lifted on these things. But you can see all of those, that's, retail. I think a lot of that's a higher number because of the essential retail that people were already doing. But you could see well under 50% even for that, and then kind of under 25% for restaurants, malls, gyms, etc. So, confidence is down. People are very concerned about safety doing things. This slide talks about operating cash on hand. The number actually went up from May to June, and I think that's because PPP payments were coming in and New Jersey state grants payments were coming in. I suspect this number might flatten or go down as we move forward. And then finally, how long this is going to impact their business. So, a month ago, people really thought it was going to be about 2 to 3 months, and now people are really thinking it's a 6+ month impact before they get to regular levels of operation. So, sad numbers, but I think they're good numbers to kick off our discussion about recovery. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and let Larisa share her screen to do her presentation.
Okay. Are you seeing it? There we go. Is that showing up for everybody? Okay, great. Hi, I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you so much, Courtney, for this opportunity to talk about a resource that I'm really proud of. We, for those of you who don't know me, I am Managing Director of Streetsense. I can tell you a little bit about us in a minute, but I have been working in the field of downtown planning and economic development for almost 25 years now. I started a Main Street program in college, actually, and I've been hooked ever since. And so I've really devoted my entire career in life to helping drive improvements in Main Street environments, and it really began with my love of historic buildings and downtowns. So that really is aligned with many of our main streets. These days, I work at Streetsense. I'll tell you about us in a second, but I also sit on the City Planning Commission for the City of New York. I sit on the board of the International Downtown Association and CORA, which I helped create a neighborhood leadership program for business improvement district directors there, and the RPA advisory board, among others. And I love New Jersey. I've done work in Inglewood, Newark, and Trenton, and Hackensack over the years. Hackensack is our most recent project. I'm going to talk to you about our recovery guide. We are so thrilled to have done that. I work quite a bit with the Local Initiative Support Corporation, which is the largest community development intermediary in the nation. They do about $1 billion of lending in the community and economic development fields. And with COVID, they came to me and asked, and since I'm sort of their in-house expert on commercial districts, if I would put together a guide for recovery for communities that need some help in establishing a blueprint for this. I know many of you are really doing tremendous work, and a lot of this may seem rudimentary in some cases, but there's so much capacity building that needs to happen within our business improvement districts and main streets, and it was clear that we needed a special guide for them. So I'll walk through this really quickly, and then we'll talk about the issues that you see on the ground. A little bit about Streetsense. I'm really thrilled to be at this organization. It's a strategy and design collective that focuses on places, and it was started about 10 to 15 years ago by brokers who quickly realized that they were struggling to lease spaces when the places that those spaces were in weren't, had limited investment or, limited access. I mean, they realized that, consulting and helping owners of properties and developers, and we do a lot of work with developers, was really critical to making the job of leasing easier. And I'm completely aligned with that. When we think about downtown environments, and especially what bids do, bids are there to make, to stage the shopper, to drive the brand, to improve the place so that we can fill vacancies and create really vibrant retail environments. So I'm glad to have landed where I did. We are about 180 people in 4 offices around the world. We've got an office in Madrid. I'm based in New York. And I think what differentiates us is that we're really driven by data and insight. And I like to say that you cannot solve, design will never solve a market problem. I come from an urban design and I'm an urban planner. I graduated from MIT, years and years ago, and learned very quickly in my career that historic preservation, I think, is a really great example. In order for us to preserve buildings, we have to find economic use for them, and economic use is driven by market opportunities. And so, we need to, for many years, downtowns did, a lot of brick sidewalks and, public space improvements, but it didn't change the underlying market dynamics. So that's really what for us drives our consultancy. And we do work in sort of working with the public sector, particularly around COVID-19 and research strategy and implementation. We've got architecture, interior design, marketing, and we're actually owned by CBRE, and they do leasing for us. So I just want to talk really quickly about, this triage that we're in. What's going to be happening, particularly in the next 12 to 18 months as we emerge, and walk through the various phases of recovery. Some of the most recent research out of McKinsey has found that about 25 to 36% of businesses will close permanently from just these 4 months of the pandemic. And, as we look forward, even with outdoor dining in the summer months, enabling some businesses, restaurants in particular, which drive a lot of our downtown economies to operate. I got a briefing for city planning commissioners yesterday, and the Department of City Planning for the City of New York found that, in their research, restaurants need 70 to 70% capacity to survive. And we know that from our work too at Streetsense. So what happens when, your outdoor dining is only driving 20 to 30 to 40% of, your previous capacity? You still do not have enough income to pay your rent every month. So, we are facing, we continue to face an existential crisis. Just because we're opening, it does not mean that the problem is over. So I do think we're in this moment of, this is a disaster. This is one of the most significant disasters, economic disasters that we've faced. And so we looked to a framework for disaster management to help us understand what business improvement districts and Main Streets should be doing. So the guide itself is really split into a few sections. One, we talk about the impact of COVID-19 on small businesses and commercial districts. I want to share with you quickly sort of what that framework for disaster management is. And then the guide, which was published about 3 weeks ago, goes through phase 1 response and phase 2 recovery. I would say, that we are moving so quickly. Phase 1 response, I think that was when everything was really, really closed. We had a complete shutdown. So I'm really going to talk about phase 2 recovery here. And, all these 3 phases sort of lead us to planning and preparation. In phase 3, these are the stages of emergency management. And a lot of the federal money that's coming is often also earmarked for not just recovery, but for planning and preparation. So how do we make sure that we, set the stage so that, we're ready for our next, for the next impact. And I really think that this cycle is going to continue given the unique situation with COVID and the need to retain social distancing until we have some sort of whether it's herd immunity or vaccine. So when we look at phase 2 recovery, there, these phases are divided into, what should you be doing as an intermediary in outreach, and then in data collection, and then in implementation. And that's what I'm going to walk you through here. I think the first thing that is really critical is, raising awareness and outreach. I mean, the first thing that nearly every bid was doing was finding partners, an immediate response, sort of, who could you be working with? Who do you need to help determine sort of what you should be doing downtown? But now as we move into this next stage and we're starting to open up, really this is about sharing your district story, raising awareness of businesses that are open. And I think one of the ways you do this is through, your local media outlets. We've done a lot of work. Our LISC work in particular really leans heavily on PR and work with media outlets, which I think in turn drives awareness that your businesses are open for business and your district is open for business. The other real sort of what we learned through disaster recovery is that we're going to need to pull together teams and coordinators to address district-wide recovery. If you haven't already done that, in your town, who are the stakeholders and leaders that need to come together and meet on a regular basis to determine solutions? If you've closed a street this week, do you continue to close a street next week? Do you need to look at new curbside restrictions or policies? Do you need to be thinking about different ways to address outdoor dining and the rules and regs associated with that? The regular communication among your stakeholders is going to be really critical to getting through the next 12 to 18 months. So creating a recovery team, I think, is a real strategy. And then fundraising and looking for resources. We know, actually, in talking to Courtney, that bids are going to feel the crunch as folks appeal their tax bills, and we may be seeing a crunch in 6 to 12 months. So thinking about fundraising now and thinking about how we get the resources we need to help our businesses through the next year or so are going to be critical. And again, there's a lot more in the guide. This is really just a highlight. The next is data collection. I think data is so critical. If you can't lead your data collection, you should be building partnerships with organizations that can do things like conduct surveys and assess changes in your district. And surveys are really valuable right now because we do not have secondary data. No one, the data about impact of COVID is going to be the data that you collect on the ground. So, you know, surveys and distributing those widely is really valuable. And in the guide, we have some examples of questions on that. And then, you know, really reviewing all your data sources to track at the state, city, and district level to support your implementation strategies, because you're going to need to communicate why you need help, why you're pursuing certain strategies, and we really start from this data perspective. And you know, a lot of organizations don't have the ability to collect data, but this is where we, you know, we suggest building partnerships and offer in the guide some suggestions about actual tools, you know, whether it's through Google Forms or SurveyMonkey to maintain this information. And we have some questions, you know, that you can ask in the guide, including, you know, understanding who owns and who's leasing space, which is absolutely critical to determining, you know, who's really at risk. And then conducting, you know, the actual assessment itself is critical. And I use the term economic injury in quotes because the EDA, the EDA federal money for COVID response is actually really quite liberal, and you have to communicate economic injury. And some of the items there include, you know, the number of storefront vacancies, your unemployment rates, your business closures, and customer sentiment. And I love, you know, data doesn't just end with the spreadsheet, it has to be shared. There are bids that are doing a great job of sharing the impact that COVID has had on their district, because this is your advocacy tool. And Central Square is a really great example. A recent bid that was recently formed has created a real movement around supporting their businesses because they've been able to communicate from the get-go on the impact that this has had. And then quickly moving on to implementation, the guide actually walks through 3 areas of implementation. You know, things that you can be doing to support your businesses and improve the business environment, and mostly that's getting resources their way. So grants, capital, and technical assistance. The second is raising awareness that your businesses are open through sales and marketing support. And, you know, and we know that businesses have to think about alternative ways to create new avenues for sales. I mentioned, you know, outdoor dining is not going to fill the hole that many of your restaurants need to stay open. So how do we help them address these issues? Give you an example, we're working in Queens with one business that, you know, had not enabled the tool to be able to sort of purchase online directly from their website that could be connected to their POS system. They were doing everything through Seamless and Grubhub, and they were leaving, you know, 20 to 30% of revenue on the table. And so we were able to help them pivot and you know, turn on the tool that they already had that connected their website and their social media to their POS system, so that they could take deliveries without, you know, delivery orders without going through Seamless or Grubhub. And then physical environment, I think this is where, you know, bids really excel. Where should we be addressing issues of cleanliness, sanitation, social distancing support? The good news is that customers who are very concerned about the coronavirus is slowly trending downwards. I appreciated Courtney's insight about New Jersey. You know, I think as we reopen, people are readjusting, and this changes every day. But, you know, we still have to recognize that in this environment, clean and sanitary is the most important consideration for consumer demand. To give people the confidence they need to venture outside of their homes, we're going to have to be focused on those issues. So what does that mean for businesses? You know, you know some of this stuff, and this is changing. You know, I'm not a health expert. We do look to our states and this sort of ever-evolving situation, but we do know that we have to educate businesses as these guidelines do come out, whether it's, you know, the cleaning high contact surfaces, PPE, things like menu boards, you know, ways in which we can prevent the need to touch things. And I use this image to say we need bids to be in the public realm management, you know, in it to address some of these challenges. This is Starbucks. where I am in Nyack, New York, which has used the entire sidewalk for their own, queuing. So what does that mean for people who need to walk to the store next to Starbucks? They have to go into the street, which has cars running by. There's actually no way for people to pass, and the purpose of a sidewalk is for that reason. So how do we accommodate all of these things? We have to work with our businesses to manage the public realm. And so what does that mean? Things like the expansion of sidewalks, outdoor seating, parklets, even assigning, plaza seating, if you're going to do that, to aid in enabling all the things that we're now demanding of our public realm, which are much more than they were before. This is where bids really play a role. And I would also argue, in supporting improved access to our districts, whether it's folks coming and picking up, creating passenger load only zones, creating, especially in, many small towns, cycling or biking might be, especially as the weather is nice, something to encourage and supporting the infrastructure to do that. Things like wayfinding signage, again, where I am in Nyack, we have signs on every post that encourage social distancing, and we've seen a lot of this in downtown environments. And then, I know that bids don't go inside the store, but I do think that providing access to capital and technical assistance to help businesses do what they need to do inside the store to create COVID safe environments. So we've been talking to bids about creating grant programs to support touchless store and bathroom fixtures. A few $100s really can make a difference in creating more touchless environments, or turning, your facade program into something that allows you to create takeout windows. Those are kinds of some ideas around store redesign, or helping them understand, what it is that they need to do in their store with respect to hard seating or sneeze guards. Are there resources or information that you can give your businesses so they know what they need to do? Our team has been working on this with a few organizations. This is sort of a before, like all the things that are wrong with the space, all the places where you might touch, and the 10 ways that are very concrete in which you might, through a program, a grant program or a low interest loan program, help these businesses do the right thing and help them understand what the right thing is to do. We do know that businesses need to change their operations too, and this is a much harder lift for bids. It's hard to tell a business owner what to do, but giving them information about reserving or where they could find the technology to support mobile pre-order or contactless payments is important. And then raising awareness. Many of you are doing marketing. We have a marketing and branding team that has done things like takeout trails in Fairfax County. This is in Virginia. And I think we can probably brainstorm ideas even on this call. I love this example from New York, Sunnyside. BID had a virtual pop-up market on Facebook to highlight local vendors. This is helping them access and support, the growth in online shopping, which we know is happening. And the Downtown Alliance in New York City created a Downtown Digital Innovation Grant to help businesses move online. So I do want to make sure you know where these resources are. You can go to our Streetsense COVID-19 Resource Hub. We have this guide there. All of this is downloadable for free. We also have a restaurant relaunch toolkit and a hotel survival guide. We do a lot of work in hospitality, which I think might be really useful for you. And we've got some, COVID-19, a lot of COVID-19 resources. The International Council of Shopping Centers has some reopening best practices that are worth taking a look at. And I always go to trade associations to find great resources, and the National Restaurant Association has a lot of COVID-19 reopening guidance that could be very useful to you as well. So I want to thank you, and then we can open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you, Larisa. A lot of chock full of information. I certainly have some questions, but I want to let you all talk first. Does anyone have either questions or things to add, some best practices that you're doing in your own towns related to this?
So, hi, this is Emily Goldman. I have a question. I'm the city planner for City of Lambertville, and our town does not have a bid or anything like that. We have a multi-regional chamber of commerce that covers 26 towns, both in New Jersey and Pennsylvania. So the city is really trying to do a lot of this for its own town, who's facing its own financial issues with COVID. So, all of these are great ideas, but how can a city itself that might not have the financial means, be able to help their businesses?
Sure. So much of this is applicable to, and it wasn't intended just for bids, it was definitely intended for cities as well. I think you play a role as an intermediary in getting all the right people to the table and identifying the challenges that sometimes fall in your lane. So I will give you an example. The city of New York, quickly recognized that zoning and permitting was preventing us from doing outdoor dining, from creating parklets, from enabling even storefront windows. In some commercial districts, you couldn't have a storefront window because it was against our underlying zoning regulations. All of that falls in, that's actually not a bid role at all. It is a public sector role to address those issues. But you might not know those are issues if you're not sitting down with your businesses in your chamber to understand them. So the idea that you would have, a disaster recovery team, or whatever you want to call it, to like peel away the layers of what the issues are so that you can address them. And those are not resource intensive issues. Those are regulatory in nature. That's just one, really concrete example of where you can lead and support this effort, but it's super important.
Bob, I think his mic isn't working. Although Bob, I did mute you, so that might have been my fault because I was getting background noise from you. His question is: we have a business that's closing. It's an Omaha steak franchise. We would like to do an exit interview with them to find out why and how much of their decision may be COVID related. Do you know of a template or other resources that we can use to conduct an exit interview?
Bob, I'll have to give that some thought. Nothing off the top of my head in terms of an actual template. The kinds of questions that, I would ask would relate to, how much cash on hand did you have at the beginning of COVID? Almost like a before COVID and an after COVID set of questions. So where were you before COVID? And then, where did you find yourself after COVID with respect to, how much cash you had, your sales, and your revenue, to be able to make the determination, like, how was this really COVID related, or was it, were there pre-COVID issues going on? But I don't have a template for you. That's just sort of some ideas to get you started.
Sherry Cronin, by the way, the two people on the phone, I had muted you too. I unmuted you. So if you do, I know Mayor Diaz is on there, and I don't know who the other phone is. And I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself. So you are just unmuted, just letting you know. But Sherry typed in a question: are you seeing an increase in the use of QR codes for restaurant menu ordering? I thought QR codes were in the way out.
Yeah, I definitely thought QR codes were on the way out too. I have not yet, but that doesn't mean it's not happening. I think this is so very new. In our work, I've seen a lot of low tech solutions for this. Like, I've seen restaurants put up large signs in their window, their menu, because you're seated outside, asking folks, well, take a picture of the menu and it's on your phone, but not that I'm aware of QR codes, but it may be happening.
Anyone else?
Here in the city of Perth Amboy, it's Wilda.
Hi,
Hi, I just wanted to just share because I was just hearing. I'm not sure what town it was again, but what here in the city, back in 2016, we did a blanket of sidewalk dining for the entire city, where any restaurant. It wasn't only for the business improvement district. We did it throughout the city so that people. In the event that other restaurants in other areas wanted to be able to have sidewalk dining, they could. And at the time, there was resistance because we were asking for an application fee, and at the same time, the actual approval also there was a fee for that. With COVID, we were able to go back to all those businesses again that, for the most part, they didn't want to participate. Now they were basically forced because of COVID, right? So we went ahead and we waived all the fees. All fees waived so that all the restaurants throughout the city, wherever they're located, they have an opportunity to do sidewalk dining. What we did was that we sent our code department to we did a 24-hour turnaround. And we had our code department go visit many of those businesses, and they basically told them how many tables they can have outside their establishment. In addition to that, to get back to how we did that, we went before our city council, and we had put in, at the time, because some of the BID in the business district, they wanted to have that service. At the end of the day, it was determined once they saw what the application fee, what we were charging. But this time around, we went ahead and waived all fees whatsoever. We waived everything just to encourage the businesses throughout the city, the restaurants, to be able to, again, so that they can offset what they're not going to be able to have within their restaurants. They can now have it, to try to help them somewhat to get them to be able to, again, be operational.
Yeah. I think that's a great example, sort of looking inward at the things that you can do as a municipality. I wanted to add, you reminded me, so this, one of the issues that we've had here in New York is that, the rule right now is you can only have tables in front of your establishment. Well, if you only have, a small frontage, that's not going to help you. You're not going to get the number of seats that you need. But they're looking to San Francisco as an example where a business can request approval from a neighboring business that may still be closed to put tables in front of that business, so that helps. So that's one thing. Obviously, parklets, like leaving the sidewalk for pedestrians, but enabling the usage of a parking spot for tables is another.
We actually have done that too. We actually have that in place. Again, back in 2016, we never knew, who would think that now, fast forward, that we would be in with this situation. Yeah. So we would also provide that for our businesses in the event that they wanted to have a parklet.
Yeah.
But this is a way of just helping our small businesses at this point.
Absolutely.
To try to, recoup some, the fact that the matter, it's sad to say that, the reality is that they, the chances are, they're not going to have that income that they used to unless they change even their, even the way they receive payment. And I think that's where we have a major problem. Like, Perth Amboy is a large Latino community, and some of them are having a difficult time, especially, they're still caught up in the old way. So the newer small businesses that have opened, especially I guess it's a generation, the age group, some are more savvy. And then and some that have been here, for such a long time are the ones that we need to start getting them educated with all these other type of, I would say, tools to get them to understand that they could do purchases online, things that they need to, that the newer businesses are doing is for us has been a challenge with the older businesses that have been around for 20 years, 15 years. Because they have not they haven't adapted to all this new technology.
I just wanted to say that I'm from Englewood. Hi, Larissa. And
Hi.
we don't have parklets, but what we did, and this was done by the city had to pass a resolution. We closed a parking lot. And we have 5 restaurants, and we're going to have another one there. And the other thing we're using is we're starting the QR codes. Using those, the first place is where we have those 6 restaurants in the parking lot. And also the city, the building code department did what you did, and also the Department of Health. So that a store, because a lot of them are small, they've gotten permission to use 1 or 2 stores next to them so that their restaurants are larger. And but we just have to have that 6 feet on the curb.
Carol, are the tables, are there a specific number assigned to each restaurant, or is it just, first come, first serve? And
The
they can,
tables, okay, you're talking about the parking lot?
yeah,
Okay, each parking lot has their own area. So they have a
Okay.
tent and they have their own area and they have a sign. So one says Blue Moon, each one has
Yeah.
their own name.
okay.
That's a really great example.
I like
Thank
that.
you. And you had mentioned, Carol, that folks are using spaces, vacant spaces next to
Or-
their restaurants. So that's actually happening too?
Yeah, you know the town, okay?
I do.
So that's why I'm telling you this. If you go down where De Columbia is, they got permission from CF Nails. So they have 2 stores. Dolce and Salata, they got permission from the plaza next door. So they have the steps and they have the pavilion. So a lot of the restaurants now have 2 other stores besides theirs. So when
the
their tables are there,
interior of the stores or?
outside.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you, because we've been hearing from brokers who are trying to broker deals, because remember, winter's coming. Outdoor dining is fine for the summer, but when winter comes, we're going to have to find indoor spaces. And so brokers have been looking to negotiate for vacancies, to expand restaurants into those spaces, temporarily. So that's something that I haven't seen happen yet, but I've heard like grumblings, and that takes a while because it's leasehold negotiations.
Well, and I guess the concern with that would also be, can they take on that added cost? They're already paying rent for 25% capacity.
All of this is
Yeah.
leasehold negotiations.
Yeah.
There are very busy attorneys having conversations, and if a space is vacant next door, this is the landlord presumably who's not getting anything for that space.
Emily, I see you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. So in Lambertville last night, we actually just adopted resolutions to allow the sidewalk cafes, streeteries, and parklets. And the city's also sponsored some outdoor, just high top dining tables in parks and parking lots and stuff. But one of the questions that came up from council last night is if there's guidelines or directions about allowing heaters in these outdoor spaces as we get into colder months.
Yeah.
And, I basically said, we'll deal with that down the road if we need to, because we're not sure when this is going to end or if they'll be allowed to have full capacity inside or not. But, for our city, at least, there really, at the moment, aren't too many vacant spaces that restaurants can expand into. We're much more of a smaller mom and pop style restaurant, maybe like 1,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet spaces. They're pretty small. So it's, I can't imagine that they'll be able to move into and have multiple locations. But so we might be looking into tented, the outdoor heaters, like that type of stuff to keep the outdoor dining if people would still use it.
Yeah, I mean, bumping, or increasing the length of time in which you can use outdoor space through heaters, through shelters, I think is the next phase. What's really interesting is in Paris, it's so common to have heaters under umbrellas, and it's a much more temperate climate. But they've extended it, and it's so interesting if you follow that discussion, because there are people who say it's atrociously inefficient. Your folks who are interested in sustainability and reducing carbon footprint are like flipping out because, I heard for someone, one of those heaters is like the cost of heating a home for a year or something. It's like, it's insane. And they're also expensive to purchase, right? So this is I can't say we've solved for this yet, but this is the next really big issue that's going to come up. I
I'll
pray
say
for a vaccine.
there's one, I think it's the Sterling Hotel. We went for Easter, and Easter's cuspy, right? But they've extended basically to 3 seasons outdoors because they have like one of those wedding tents, those thick type of wedding tents, and the heaters. And so they have people in there, and heck, if you have a temperate winter like we had this year, you could get even longer out of it. And I think, personally, I don't see us getting there even by the end of the year where you're going to fill up a restaurant. So as the longer you can have that extra capacity outside, it's going to be the better. So I think people should probably start planning for that and thinking about it. So it's not, again, this like reactive thing that we've been doing for the past 3 months.
Yeah, but I think this all comes down to, this is why municipalities and bids really need to work together right now, because every single thing we've talked about is going to butt up against some regulatory or permitting issue. Every business is going to be very concerned about doing the things they know they need to do because they think they're going to get fined. And then even when you do allow, for outdoor cafes or parklets, this is going to need tweaking over time. Just yesterday, the city of New York added a requirement to the outdoor dining that would put reflective tape on the outside of any barrier that's being used, right? Because you want cars to be able to see in the evenings, this outdoor dining that's there. And so that was an enhanced safety measure that, after the first week, they realized they needed. The open question now is like, oh, well, how are deliveries going to happen? Are we requiring people to bring their furniture in at night? Can they leave it out at night? Like, we're inventing this stuff as we go along, and it's why weekly meetings with your city, with your bid, are really necessary to continue to tweak it. I know in Nyack we had 1 night of closure for the restaurants, and very few people were wearing masks, and they just stopped the whole thing. And that's not a solution for our restaurants if we want them to survive. And so we have to be continually trying to improve these things, and that's where the task force and recovery groups really can help.
Robin, before you go, I see you put your video on, so I know you want to say something. There's a little bit of dialogue in the chat, so be sure to check it out. Emily put up the Division of Fire Safety information about the heaters, so check that out.
No, about canopies and umbrellas.
Oh,
and
okay, canopies. Yeah. All right. We'll have to look into this more, but I know people do it, so clearly it can be done. All right, Robin.
Thank you. So it's Robin Lapidus from Flemington, New Jersey, and actually formerly the director of the Central Square Business Association. So that was it was a great surprise to see that they're doing fabulous things with their bid. My questions are really about larger public gatherings. So and I would like to ask about 2 types, because one type is the large gathering where, the big seasonal events, street festivals, bring everybody together in the street. And I know a lot of us have postponed our big events in Hunterdon County. I think we're going to be close to the 500 people mark in July. A lot of events have been moved to the end of August or September, but we have a lot of questions about how do we limit the number of people to match whatever the executive orders are, Is it free ticketing? Does everything have to be barricaded? And a lot of questions about, can you use a public street for a private event where you're counting numbers? And then my second question is about gathering for town meetings. We have a master plan. We have charrettes planned, and we're an opportunity zone. So we actually got some grant money. We have to have consensus building town meetings. And I'm just curious if you're hearing people doing things in tents, or is everything still online? How are the planners helping towns and business areas to have gatherings? Is it virtual or in person? What's up? So those are my two questions.
Can I jump in real quick, and then Larisa, by all means, on the stay tuned. I actually saw that Bloomfield is having something on July 4th, which keyed me in. I sent an email to Olin right away, and I also copied Chris because I don't know if any of his people to the next forum I'm hoping actually is going to be about events, and it'll be then after Olin's event, so he can say what worked and what didn't work for his event. But I'm sure Larisa has some more on that. But on outreach, just so I think I'm a planner, and that's my other hat, and I'm actually working on the NJTPA's long range transportation plan outreach. We got the contract like March 16th for that, and then all hell broke loose. So we've been trying to figure out how to do outreach, and we are pivoting a lot to virtual, and we're going to be doing virtual webinars, but we're also creating a stakeholder advisory committee of hard to reach folks. So like organizations that represent the hard to reach folks, so that we can get them on a webinar and say, how are you reaching your people? How can we reach your people? And I think a lot of it's going to be kind of targeted and using those organizations. So maybe using the church that represents the Latino population, or working with LEP classes. And then, your senior center, the same thing. And it's going to be not large gatherings, but things as much as we can do virtually, or very low touch, stay away, maybe still like a table outside that somebody could approach and then move along and somebody else can come in. So that's just us. So, but Larisa.
Yeah, I don't have anything more to add to that great response on the second one. The first one, I'd actually be interested in what the hive mind, the folks on this call are experiencing, because my sense is that right now, those public gatherings are not anything we want to support or encourage. It's unfortunate, but I think that's where we have to be really creative in thinking about what other ways, the point of that is always to drive business, right? What other ways can we drive business? That's where the raising awareness, the branding, marketing, I think that's the direction to pivot, but I'm really curious about what folks on this call think.
Yeah, anyone else planning any events, or still in kind of hiding mode on that? Carol, you're unmuted. Did you have something? Oh, no.
We are planning events. We still are planning to have events. And I think we're thinking that, like, if I know Clinton is having their Friday night music events. So I know there are towns that are doing things, if we're planning to close our main street, and I talked to the police and said, well, how do we keep it at 500 people? Because anytime you close a street and invite people, so we will limit where we advertise. That would be a first. Generally you're advertising to get as many people as you possibly can. And then we'll just have to have some counter system and then some waiting line system, but it does feel very complicated.
Yeah.
Hey, Courtney, as it relates to events, we for the most part have canceled events, and what we're trying to do is move funding into some direct support for small businesses including creating public spaces. And I just want to add something to that. You know, some communities I think are really getting it right. Jersey City, for instance, is going ahead, like many other communities, and they're actually permitting themselves public spaces and then working with the bids to program those spaces. And what that does is it relieves the bid of the insurance liability. What I'm finding in a lot of places is when the bid has to take on the insurance liability, our carriers are saying, no way. It's just, and in general, and I don't know if other people are experiencing this, but in the last couple of years, we've started getting pushback from insurance carriers for events and some of the language that some municipalities are requiring to be placed in COIs. But in general, the cities that are going ahead and getting out in front of this, like Jersey City, and actually creating spaces themselves, and then just looking to the bids to provide management support, minor investment, tables and chairs, things like that, that's really, really helpful. I think that's what will make public space creation a lot more successful in this case. Yeah.
Chris, offline, tell me who at the city's working on that so I can reach out to them, please.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, I'll tell you right now, Barka Patel, who's the transportation planner,
Yeah.
She's done an outstanding job. Her and Brian together, and Andrew as well. They've done an outstanding job. They're like an in-house placemaking unit.
They are.
You know, and it works really, really well.
Yeah. Okay, I'll reach out to Barka.
Yep.
Maybe she can join our forum
Yep.
with Oatland. There's a chat question, unless people want to talk about this a little longer. No, there's a chat question. How does a chamber and Township Economic Development Committee work together when the elected officials don't engage them as a resource? I think the same goes with bids. I think some towns just, the bids do their thing and we approve their budget, but otherwise we're not engaged.
Yeah. I mean, every single situation is different because every personality and every elected official is different. This really gets back to, Bob Zuckerman's on the call. He's gone through the neighborhood leadership training course. It is a leadership skill to bring people together to start conversation and dialogue. And the first step is having a sit down and a conversation. I don't think there's any way around that, to understand what their issues and priorities are, where you align, and, suggesting a course of action, which is, it could be, creating a recovery task force, and we'd really like electeds to be at the table. You have to understand your electeds and and every kind of government is a little different. In some cases, it's not electeds who you need to be worried about. It may be, whatever internal department at your city, but, who is it that you, in an ideal world, want to bring to the table to have regular discussions with? And that's all I can really say that would be useful more generally. I don't know if there's any way around it.
I think I can also give an example. I saw an article, Montclair Center and the small businesses actually showed up at a public meeting to basically shame the council for not doing slow streets, parklets, all of that type of stuff. And then wouldn't you know, like the next week, the council had resolutions on the docket to do those things. So it was basically, the bid galvanized their members and they all just bombarded that public comment section of the council meeting.
It's so interesting. There's like the carrot and the stick approach, you know, if you can't get a sit down with them, then you have to go to a public meeting and raise ruckus, but you want to try to get a sit down, right? Yeah. That's the first, that's the first and easiest step.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly working with them is easier, but if they refuse, then you might have to shame them. Let's see. Oh, there was a question that got buried in the chat real quick. Somebody asked about those digital innovation grants, and I Googled it. That's a New York thing, right?
Yes,
not a,
Downtown Alliance, that is the right program. So the link is up there.
right. So that's not something available to us. I do though, you know, we've been working with NJEDA. We've really been pushing, apparently, just in case I didn't mention this at the last meeting, the DBIZ, as much as we've been pushing for it, is not going to come back. The Treasury took that $2 million. It's gone. Unfortunately, although we could maybe try to advocate for it to come back in the next budget. EDA has expanded their microloans to nonprofits. So it's a 2% interest loan paid back over 10 years. No payments required for the first 3 years. And if you still exist after a year, 10% is forgiven, which is basically your interest. So, you know, a grant would be better. But if you are looking for resources to help your businesses with parklets or, you know, these mass buy type of things, that is a resource, although the grant application is not going to be available to the end of July, and I don't know how quick the turnaround is going to be. So how useful it'll be, I don't know, but it's coming. So just wanted to share that with folks.
I mean, one of the things we've tried to do is make the requirements for the parklets in particular as sort of low capital intensive as humanly possible. Yeah. Because we know this is not a permanent solution. Where, you know, many communities are, for a variety of reasons, are going to want to limit outdoor dining, you know, when the time comes, right? They need the parking, or it's too loud and you've got a mixed use neighborhood. Like there are lots of reasons why you might want to manage that situation. And so you don't want a business to have to invest in high cost infrastructure. You know, so you may not need grants. If the program is designed to allow for a low cost intervention, that's even better, right? Then the need for resources is less.
So putting my NJTPA hat back on, we're really intrigued to see, because this is something Europe does, right? Or the Canadian cities. I went up to Quebec last year, and one of their main drags that they have a lot of restaurants on, like every third parking space or 2 or 3 were parklets, and that's just it all summer and maybe spring and fall. I don't know what the season is. That's what they do because people like to sit outside, and it's actually, everybody's like, oh, there's cars going by. It was very pleasant because people really did it. There were flowers and it was beautiful. So I think a lot of us are hoping and thinking that doing this will now change the mentality here in the States, and they'll understand that, you know, it's securing the economic stability of your businesses is actually through getting people to be able to use that business as opposed to having 2 parking spots in front of that business. Especially
the world doesn't end if we take the parking.
Right. Especially if you're in a walkable downtown.
Yeah.
One of my coworkers was saying, so they closed a street for the restaurants, and he went down there and there was just a pile of 20 bikes because there were no bike racks. Because they never thought that people would bike to downtown. But you know what? People never bike to downtown.
That's exactly the point, right? Yep. Like, you know, we need to think about this holistically. And biking, I think, is a great example. If you create, you know, bike infrastructure, whether it's lanes or safe places to park, especially in many of these Main Street districts that do have residential demand, that, you know, if people are queasy about, you know, traveling too far, whatever, we want to help our business districts more deeply penetrate their local market. That's a phenomenal way to do it, especially if we're now saying it's going to be a little bit harder to park downtown. We've got to figure out a balance.
Right.
You know, and accessibility in other forms, you know, walkability, bikeability is part of the solution.
Yeah.
These places want it too. I mean, even places that historically, you know, felt that if you removed 1 parking space, it would kill them. I've talked to so many districts where they want it, but they can't figure out, and this is what they need help with. They need help. They need planning help in figuring out how to treat some of the logistics. Like, how do we account for deliveries? How do we account for Uber drop-offs Or if I'm doing a big Uber delivery business, how do I close off part of the street or close off parking, but then also accommodate those other opportunities as well? And this is the time to do this type of planning. We should take advantage of this now, while things are sort of loosened up a little bit, and really get in there and sort of turn the corner, as it were, on public seating.
Emily.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, so kind of along those lines. So in Lambertville, since May 15th, we've basically took away parking on our main street in our downtown to create those expanded sidewalk areas. And we've been getting a lot of mixed reviews, and in doing that, we've also provided some free designated curbside pickup spaces where otherwise the businesses would have to pay the daily fee to reserve those parking spaces, or things like that. So but we've been getting a lot of pushback from the businesses themselves, saying that these barriers and removing the parking are making it that so nobody comes to their stores. And we're trying to explain that we're trying to make it so it's safe for people to actually want to come back into our city and shop in our stores. And we've gone so far as to take photos of this expanded area of people in it, and take hourly counts on the weekends of people using it, because we're only setting it up on Saturdays and Sundays at this point, when we expect the higher foot traffic. And the businesses still are constantly saying, well, based on our 30 years experience of having a business in town, we know that this is a barrier for people to actually come into our stores. And we're trying to figure out, how do we get the data? We can't necessarily track to show these expanded walkways are making this a safer place and reducing the number of virus contractions and things like that. So we're not really sure how can we effectively let the businesses know that this is actually a good thing to have these expanded sidewalks and deal with pushback.
I think you touched upon it. I was going to speak to data. This is the moment where you collect information from folks about the actual impact that this is having. And I think about surveys that it is true. Some businesses, this is like when you've got an event downtown, some businesses benefit from that and others actually don't. It depends on the kind of business. The local pharmacy downtown is going to struggle, if people can't come in and pick up their prescriptions. So we have to recognize there are legitimate concerns to some of their issues, but I would think about surveying people, surveying your businesses, asking them, the impact of the closures, asking them, whether their business is affected positively by the closure, negatively, tracking sentiment a little bit, so that you can turn and say, I know you're the squeaky wheel on this issue, but actually, 65% of other businesses are in support. There's nothing better than that information.
And I think your community too, surveying your community.
Absolutely.
So them saying, are you more likely to go down if you have more space? Or, I think the community sentiment, and it is weird, I follow when we close stuff in Jersey City, and it actually tends to be all the people who live near that are all for it. And then there's just rabble-rousers from other places who are just like, oh, blah, blah, blah. But the people who actually live there and are using those businesses are in support of it. And we had pushback at the pedestrian mall in Jersey City initially. It was only weekends to start during the summer, and then it was the summer, and now they keep expanding block by block all full time, because the businesses are like, this is good for us. It's increased traffic. People are hanging out. They'll jump from one place to the other, whereas before it was uncomfortable and they just go do what they had to do and leave. But that's all anecdotal, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, I guess, so we have a lot of communication with our business. We have weekly meetings set up with the business community, a weekly meeting set up with our chamber, even a weekly meeting set up with New Hope across the river to try to coordinate efforts. And we have a weekly email that goes out to the businesses that includes a survey every single week, but we just don't have people actually completing it is the problem. So it's, I'm not really sure, and maybe there's some advice or something. How do we actually get them to complete the surveys we're creating so we can get that feedback?
Hey, Emily.
Incentive with a gift card.
Yeah. Emily, here's a thought. I mean, I don't know what your particular circumstances there, but I mean, you might want to focus on a couple of key areas where you create public seating where you know it's going to be successful. And then you demonstrate for those who would be naysayers, you demonstrate, you know, the benefit and how it's being utilized, and then slowly build up an appetite for it in other places and start it out slowly. And, you know, Courtney pointed out the Newark Avenue pedestrian mall in Jersey City, when it first was even an idea, there were people like, you know, ready to like, you know, run down Newark Avenue with like burning stakes and like, you know, kill somebody. I mean, it was rough, but, and I'd be happy to put you together with the director of their SID down there. She can fill you in on the history and where they are now with it. It was very quickly realized to be a huge benefit. I mean, when you give people the opportunity to congregate and hang out and experience a place in that way, it's not just a benefit for the residents, it also is a huge benefit for the business owners. It creates an experience that you can't replicate in any other way. And now, I mean, I don't think people would ever, they would never want to be without the pedestrian wall there, including the businesses, you know? So, but yeah, I would try out, you know, take it in small doses, make it really successful, and let them come back to you and say, look, we want more of this. We want to try it out, you know?
Okay.
I see Laura Kirkpatrick. I'm unmuting you. She's had her hand up for a while now. Go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to add what Red Bank is doing. We've shut Broad Street, which is our main street in the downtown, and we close it Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. And then we switch over to another street on the side, Mama Street, for Sunday. So this is our second weekend we're doing it. It was extremely popular last week. So we're hoping to keep it going through the summer. And it was really made possible by a task force that started with our borough. And we have the support of the Borough Council, and we're just trying to make this happen as best as we can. We shifted a lot of our holiday lighting money to purchase Edison lights and some uplighting in the trees to make it, you know, a little bit more festive and fun.
Give it some ambiance.
So we're still trying to figure out how we're going to pay for our holiday lights, but because we bought some LED lights, hopefully they'll last and we'll be able to still make that happen. In terms of our events, we've gotten rid of all of our big events. We canceled our Sunday in the Park with the New Jersey Symphony, which was supposed to be next weekend. That's not going to happen. But we are going to do our Street Life, which is our on-street performers. That's paid for through a grant. So we're happy that we can still do that. And it's kind of low impact. But the other thing we're going to do is we're still going to do our sidewalk sale. We're going to shift it probably from July to the end of August. And we're pretty confident that we can do that even with the social distancing. You know, our street hopefully will still be closed, so we'll have some flexibility. But I think that's something we can do, that we can really focus on our retail component that we've kind of been missing. We've been very supportive of our restaurants, and then we've had a curbside pickup program for everybody, but we really need to do something more for our retail and our service businesses in our downtown, and that's where we need help. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Laura. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Well, this is great. Another wonderful exchange of ideas. So like I said, no forum next week, possibly not the week after, but then we'll get back on the week after that and do them every 2 to 3 weeks for the rest of the summer. If there's anything you are really yearning to learn more about, please drop me an email and I can try to make that happen. I'll find an expert to join us. But really, Larisa, thank you so much. I think this was great information.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say, if anybody has any questions, follow-up questions, you can also contact me at Laura Ortiz at streetsense.com, and I've included it in the chat.
Great. And her PowerPoint is up already on our website. This video will get up as soon as I can get it downloaded and then back uploaded to YouTube. I think that's it. Everybody, it's almost 4th of July. Have a great weekend this weekend and a great 4th of July next weekend. And with that,
Thank you, Courtney.
goodbye.
Take care, everybody.